Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I am really excited to share some of my tips about unblocking yourself creatively and getting started writing right away. And what my hope is for this workshop is that after I am done talking, you want to start writing. So that's my goal for today. Here we go. So, as you know, we're going to be talking about getting started writing, unblocking our creativity, and you're wondering who exactly is this Christie Stratos who's going to be sharing these things with me. So who am I? I am someone who owns my own business. I'm an entrepreneur. My editing business is called Proof Positive, and you'll have the links in the PDF if you want to just download it. I'll have them at the end as well, so don't worry about it. My business, we are a small business. We are editors of international best-selling authors, award-winning authors, and people just getting started who have no idea how to write. So for that, I'm a writing coach, which I very much enjoy. I am also the author of the suspense novels, Anatomy of a Darkened Heart and Brotherhood of Secrets. I also have short stories and poetry that have been published in literary magazines and anthologies. And finally, I am the host of Writers Showcase podcast. So you might be wondering, why would my business be affected if I'm an editor? Well, I'll tell you very, very briefly. Basically, once Amazon deprioritized book sales and book shipping, that is when small presses stopped hiring freelancers like me. So I had a number of people, I had a number of small presses, and they had projects with me and they were pretty big and they all dropped off. And the good thing is that they're trying to take care of their full-time employees, which is fantastic. The bad thing is that it, of course, affects me directly. So, like I said, if you want to go into the chat and find my Venmo and donate, I really appreciate it. And if not, that is totally fine. If you could just spread the word about what I do and who I am, that's good enough for me. So in today's agenda, what we're going to cover is how do you get started writing, whether you're a writer or not a writer? How do you become limitless in your creativity and unblock yourself? And how do you then stay motivated? So let's move into the very first thing. You may recognize this. Let me minimize here. You may recognize this quote. It is super famous. It says, "The first draft is just you telling yourself the story," and that's by Terry Pratchett. And the whole point of this is that you should never feel nervous in front of a blank page. Now, we all do. We look at a blank page. It's one of the most common syndromes that we have. And we say, oh my God, like, what am I going to write here? Is it going to be good enough? What if it's terrible? What do I do with myself? Do I even have anything to say? What genre is it? The point is that none of that actually matters. The whole point is that you can write anything. The blank page is really your safe space, just like when you brainstorm. That's your safe space. Nobody can hear what you're thinking. Nobody can hear if your thoughts are like totally incomplete and all over the place. Nobody knows. Neither does the blank page. The blank page is not judging you. So the great thing is that you can just start writing. One of my biggest problems that I got past was when I had graduated from college. I wanted to write, but I felt like the things in my head were things nobody would understand. So I didn't know what to do about that. And I decided, you know what? This has been hanging around in my head for so long. I'm just going to start writing this stuff. It was all symbolic, and it was all stuff that I really didn't think anybody would get. I started writing this stuff down thinking it was nonsense. Guess what? It turned out that it was really symbolic and metaphorical, and I was able to actually submit it to a literary magazine and get it published. Now, I never could have done that if I hadn't just written whatever was in my head, literally. So the next slide, I just want to briefly tell you, in case you're interested in joining the writing community. By the way, that's an easy thing to do. You can just go on like Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, put in hashtag writing community, and you will find a slew of different people to follow, people to talk to. People are always looking to talk. People who are asking for writing advice, you can ask for writing advice. So I just wanted to share this very briefly, that if you, run into some writers and you're talking with them, a lot of the time they're going to ask you if you are a planner or a pantser. So I wanted to briefly explain that a planner is someone who prefers to do things like outline. They prefer to, for example, have plot, and subplot outlines. They might want to do some character sheets. They may want to just write about their characters so that they have like the color of their hair and their eyes, their appearance. They might want to do some random dialogue just to see how they write. They may want to sort of pick out the settings ahead of time, and everything is like sort of set for them. So they're ready to get writing. They sit down and they've got everything sort of bullet pointed there. So what is a pantser? Pantser is someone who just writes, and that's me. That's exactly what I do. So I just sit down and I write whatever I want to, and it can be out of order, it can be in order, it can be anything. A lot of times I'm just unblocking my creativity, which we will get to in just a moment. And then there's, of course, the in-between. There's always an in-between, the plantser, which is basically when you like to do maybe like a loose outline, you know, maybe write some things about your character in advance and then get working. So it's just sort of in between. And I wanted to share that with you just in case you hear those terms, you want to know what they are. Now, what we're all here for, the most important part. If you want to be limitless in your creativity, doesn't that sound like something that's really intimidating? You're sort of like, how can I do that? That sounds a little bit crazy, maybe a little bit too much. Is that possible? It absolutely is. This is many times how people are able to write multiple genres, you know, and you're saying like, how can they go from sci-fi to, you know, historical romance and, you know, and then write journal entries and just, you know, random stuff. How can they do this and be so creative? They are often limitless in terms of creativity. So what you want to do when I'm talking about this, what I'm talking about is expanding into territory that feels out of your range, and this can help you in many areas of your life. Once I started doing some of the things that made me limitless, I was suddenly able to take on jobs like, you know, work, freelance work that I never thought I would be capable of. So this is a benefit to you in every way. This is not just writing fiction or anything like that. The other thing to note is that it's a matter of your mindset and trusting yourself instead of judging yourself. One of the things that was my problem was I constantly judged myself. I would think, you know, of a great idea and immediately put myself down. And the things I would say to myself were things I wouldn't say to anyone. They were terrible. So, you know, these are things that, you know, we want to get comfortable with ourselves, comfortable with our process, and we're going to talk all about that. So I have two key exercises to share with you right now about becoming limitless. Now, the first one I'm going to tell you is using writing prompts. And probably immediately you're thinking, how can writing prompts make me limitless? You know, everyone talks about writing prompts, no big deal. The whole key with writing prompts is that often, you know, let's say you wanted to buy a book. I have a book here that has writing prompts in it. It's called 642 Tiny Things to Write About. And it's basically just a very small, I doubt you can see this, but just in case you can, I'll hold it up later as well when I show my screen bigger. But the idea is it's just 642 writing prompts. Now you can find writing prompts online. You can make up your own writing prompts, but it's what you do with them that really makes them powerful. This is part of what's going to make you limitless. It's not about a writing prompt saying, for example, a lot of them will say something like, whatever is closest to you on the table, you know, take that and describe it, or, you know, something kind of crazy like that, where you're like, what am I supposed to do with like a pencil or a pen? That's what's near me. You know, I have this calendar. How am I going to really talk about that? You know, what am I going to write about? This isn't, or it might be like, this isn't my genre. I have no interest. That was one of the frustrations for me when I had, you know, this little book that I just told you about the writing prompts. The whole key is that you flip the writing prompt on its head. So, and you're taking it and you're making it what you want it to be, something that speaks to you. So I'm going to read you one. For example, this one is Frankenstein's best actor acceptance speech. What? For me, I have no interest in that. You know, I mean, Frankenstein is great and, you know, it's a interesting one, but it has absolutely nothing to do with anything I would write. So how can that possibly benefit me? Well, here's the key. You want to flip it on its head. What do I see in this? Immediately I picture, you know, Frankenstein on a stage, accepting at the Oscars, you know, accepting this award, and I have no interest. But like, what if I just sort of let my brain wander? And I don't judge myself. I let it go wherever it wants to go. And I say, you know, What if Frankenstein came up with his own awards? What if he held the Monster Awards, right? And this can be like crazy stuff. I'm saying this out loud to you. You can laugh, you can think it's silly, you can do anything, but that's the whole point. I'm going to, think of whatever I want to, and I'm going to write that down, and I'm just going to go with it. So like, what if Frankenstein held the Monster Awards, and like, there were all these, monsters in 2020, and like all from the movies, and maybe even from the books, or, in 2020 or something like that. And I'm coming up with different awards that he's handing off. And of course, Frankenstein should be dead by now, but actually he's still alive and then I come up with like this whole way that he's still alive, and I allow myself to explore something way out there. This is something you want to allow yourself to do, because while it seems like maybe it's off topic of what you would normally write, that's kind of the point. Because if you're constantly thinking in terms of what you already write, you are in a box. So we want to think outside of that, and we want to take these kinds of writing prompts, and the goal of messing with these writing prompts in that way is to be able to train your brain that you can work outside of any box or any instruction that's given to you. That's the whole goal. So if what I just said doesn't speak to you, then look for some way that does speak to you about training your brain to think outside of the instructions given to you. Now, I want to give you one more example. This is another really powerful exercise. If you think of a TV show or a book or a movie, a series, anything that you really love, like you feel passionate about it, that's the best kind. Think about how you could possibly add on to it. Think about if you want to take, like maybe you have a favorite character and you want to make up a new storyline for him, or you're like, you know what, I liked him in season 2, but I wish he'd made this decision instead of that decision. Start taking that character and working outside of what they actually did. Same thing with the plot. If you're like, you know what, I wish overall the plot had gone in that direction, work in that direction. So these are things you can write, or you can just brainstorm, even just thinking about it and eliminating your judgments of yourself, which I'm going to get to in the next slide. Those are very powerful things. The point here, the goal that you're trying to get to become limitless, is taking something that already exists and spinning it into your own thing. Being able to take a character that you already know and making them into whatever you can think of. Now, that can be hard for a lot of people. You can say like, for me, for example, I really like Downton Abbey. And Thomas is like my favorite character. I love him. He's so evil. He's my favorite. I love villains, right? So Thomas is my favorite. And this first season is my absolute favorite season. And I often try to push myself to think of where would that season have gone if I had done A or B, or let's say we got to another season where he went into, I believe he goes into the war at that time. And, things go, I don't want to ruin it for you if you haven't seen it, but things go a specific way with him where he's trying to get out of his time in the war. What if things had gone differently and he couldn't get out of it? What do I think that character would have done? What if I added in a different character that doesn't exist in Downton Abbey and I put them together? What could happen? Could I change him in any way? Could I affect him with this new character that I have come up with? Like, this is just a whole lot of brainstorming that you can do. And it can be so, so helpful, especially if you start running into blocks. So again, it's taking something that exists and being able to push past that, push the boundaries and make it into your own thing. Now let's get to unblocking yourself, because what a lot of you are probably thinking is, yeah, but I feel either stupid doing that, or, I have this block of feeling like that box is just there and I can't get rid of it. What about that box? How can I handle it? So one of the most important things about limitless creativity is that it becomes available when you honor your ideas and you identify what's holding you back. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about right now. So I have a whole list of potential things that could be holding you back. And here are some solutions. Here are some ways to get past them. These are major problems that not all writers talk about. Not all writers know how to break out of them. Not all editors know what to tell you. But as a writing coach, I absolutely love dealing with this kind of stuff. So let's talk about the first one, for example. I'm just going to check my time, make sure I'm doing okay. Yes, I am. So one of the things you want to do is write when inspired. And the first thing that would come into my mind back when I was in corporate America was, yeah, that's easy to say, but I don't have any time for that. when am I going to do that? I work like practically 24/7. Well, what I found was that, first of all, if I didn't write ideas down as soon as I got them, I would lose them, and it doesn't matter if it's in a bullet point format or how you do it. Really, really doesn't matter. Break yourself of the habit of thinking it has to be perfect. We're going to get to that as well. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be your ideas. Write them down as they come to you. Use speech recognition. A lot of people find that super helpful, to use speech recognition and just talk into like the Notes app on your phone. That is so helpful. And you can just get it out. You don't even have to type. But if you find that you're just so busy and that even that overwhelms you because it's kind of unstructured, the thing to consider is doing a writing sprint. So this is another thing I didn't believe in until I actually tried it. A writing sprint, in case you don't know, is something where you set aside a specific amount of time and you set a timer and you write without stopping. You write nonstop for that amount of time. So for example, I would set aside in my super busy day, 10 minutes only. And I would go somewhere. I mean, you could do this at lunch. You could do this before you leave in the morning, for work. You could do it after work, whenever is convenient for you, or convenient, whatever is best for you. That's what you want to do. You set your timer. You kind of have an idea of what you might write, just like the topic of this character, right? Or, I'm going to continue the scene I started the other day. Start your timer and just write. Again, do not focus on perfection, perfect words, nothing. Just keep going and going and going until that timer goes off. And believe me, when you sit back, you're going to say, I can't believe I just did that. I just got all that out. Whether it's usable or not is not the point. The point is that you're unblocking yourself and you're allowing yourself to write your ideas. So that leads me into my next point, writing ideas that take up space. So if an idea seems trapped in your head, like you just keep thinking about it, you can't get it out of your head, you don't even know if it's worth anything, but it's just sitting there, this is something that you want to pour out onto paper. It doesn't matter if you're typing or if you're writing on paper. I'm just, saying those words really doesn't make a difference how you decide what your preference is, but just pour it out onto the paper and just let it go. One of the things that happened to me with my first book was that I had this idea stuck in my head of one of my characters having a dream sequence. And I kept thinking like, I really don't think that's going to work. I don't think that's going to be any good, but it's stuck there. I couldn't get rid of it. So what I do, I put aside like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I think it was, and I just wrote it out. I just wrote everything that came to me about that dream sequence. And when the time was up, I stopped and I sat back and I said, that was really cool, but it's not actually going to fit into my book. Guess what? I was totally unblocked and I was able to move forward because that idea was out of my head. The things that you discover about your work that, you may not want to include are just as valuable as the things that you do want to include. So going back to the idea of writing imperfectly, this is so important. I used to struggle so much with perfectionism. I still have twinges of it. It really depends what I'm doing. But with writing, I used to sit in front of the screen and say, well, unless I have the perfect sentence right, I can't do this. Like what I'm writing is going to be stupid. What I'm writing is not going to be good enough. I'm not going to feel like it's ready to be published. Well, of course it's not going to be ready to be published. This is going back to the quote that I shared with you from the beginning. Your first draft is simply you telling yourself the story. You're just writing. It can be anything. One of the things that I really like to do to help myself with that is I really like to take a notebook. I have an example here again, like when I share my screen, when I go back to myself in full view, I'll show you this. I made sure that I took a notebook and I started pasting pictures in it, and I started crossing things out on purpose and writing like sideways in it and all kinds of things like that. I'll show you when we get, when you can see me better. And I did that on purpose to prove to myself that doing things imperfectly was not going to ruin my creativity. It was actually going to help, and it did. So I just had to do that. I just had to force myself to keep crossing things out and writing things that weren't perfect and just doing it. So let's go into experimenting. Are you not sure which way you want to go with your story? Are you not sure what you want to do? Even if we're talking nonfiction, are you sure that you want to, explore this facet of your memoir? Let's just say, do I want to talk about this? Maybe I don't want to share it. I'm not sure. Write it. That's the only way to know. I used to think that if I wrote the wrong thing, I could never set it right. And that is so untrue. It's the opposite. I was blocking myself and I couldn't move past it. So when I'm not sure what I want to do next, which direction my character is going to take, I write in one direction, whether I'm sure about it or not. I just start writing. And sometimes when I start writing, I'm like, oh, no, this is terrible. This isn't what I want. And, so I head in the other direction. Sometimes I write both directions fully, and then I make the decision by moving forward with the manuscript, which one fits better, But you need to just get that out of your head, get it onto the paper so you don't have to think about it anymore. You're trying both ways. This is really good for the way your brain works, and you're training yourself that all its ideas are valid. Let's move on to recognizing negative feelings, which is connected with the one after that, identify your box. So when you recognize, like you go to write and suddenly you're like, I feel so stupid. This is just the worst thing ever. This is a terrible idea. Or like, I'm really embarrassed to even write this on a blank page. That is embarrassing to me. So many people feel imposter syndrome. It's just not good enough. I'm not a writer. What makes me a writer? I don't even know. Or feeling like you don't deserve to write. There are so many negative feelings that could come up. And the point is not to say, oh, well, I can't do that then. The point is the opposite. The point is to realize that this is coming from somewhere inside yourself, whether it's an insecurity or whether it's, someone like maybe you had a teacher at some point who told you that you're a terrible creative writer. And now that's kind of like stuck in your head. Or, kind of like, you participated, in class, you raised your hand and you said something that you thought was really smart and everyone laughed at you. That kind of stuff can stick with you, that can really stick with you. And it can make you feel like your ideas are stupid or you're afraid of expressing things that you think are good. These are the things that we have to break through. And the better you do in identifying where they come from, the better you're going to feel and the more of an idea you're going to have of how to get out of it. How can I solve that problem? How can I break free of that box that has been created for me or that I have accidentally created myself? Like if you have a job like I used to have, there are some jobs that are like, here are the things that you can do. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. And you start feeling very pent up and sort of like scared of expressing yourself in case you say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. That can affect your creativity as well. But recognizing that it's there is so, so powerful. And then you can force yourself past it, or you can start doing other exercises to fix that mental state. And the last thing I want to say is that you want to listen to yourself at all times. It is great to look up writing advice and, see what the experts say, to, take editor's advice. But the thing is that just because J.K. Rowling had a table where she kept track of, where each character was and the time that they were there, and that worked for her, doesn't mean it's going to work for you. The most important thing is that if you try to go in that direction, for example, and it doesn't work, like you feel your creativity is actually like backing away from you, like you just can't write anymore, then that's just not right for you. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Everyone has a different method of writing, and discovering that for yourself is super, super important. And that's really just a matter of honoring your own feelings. When I wanted to start writing, I was thinking, I really want to outline stuff because I would love to know where everything is going in advance. And then I could just, I have this whole outline and all I'm doing is filling in the gaps. And you know what? That killed my creativity. I just couldn't do it. And I started feeling like I can't write anymore. It wasn't that I couldn't write anymore. It's that I needed to just be a pantser, which is just how I naturally am. It's like experiment, and don't be hard on yourself. Just because something doesn't work, that doesn't mean anything at all. Move on to another strategy. Next thing I want to talk about, we are probably going to run over the half hour by just a little bit. Hope you guys don't mind. But one of the most valuable things you can do that might seem harder to you than it actually is including your own feelings and experiences. This is both authentic because you've experienced it, you know what it's like, and it's also cathartic. So many writers say that pieces of themselves are in what they've written. Experiences they have morph in their character, and they're presented differently maybe than like what you actually went through, but it is an authentic experience, and you know the feelings that you're getting across because you've had them. When you've had those feelings, your writing can go more toward a showing instead of telling, which I can do like a whole class on. Honestly, that is a fascinating subject. But so you might be wondering, okay, that's great, but how do I do it? No matter what you're doing, you can infuse any part of your writing with yourself, whether you mean to or not. One of the great things about this is that right now we are in a time with coronavirus, and I'm not going to talk about coronavirus. We're not going there. We're just going to talk about how you can use it to your benefit, actually creatively. So many of us are feeling really anxious. We're feeling very stressed. Maybe you lost your job and you don't know what to do. You're sort of like, I don't know how I'm going to possibly get another job. The unemployment is so high, whatever that may be. Guess what? You're going through that, and a ton of other people are going through that, and they want to read that they are not alone. So one of the things that often happens is you can start unloading stuff that you've been through. I want to give you an example. You might be thinking like, well, I have a lot of anxiety. Let's say I have a lot of anxiety. Well, who wants to read about anxiety or depression or, negative feelings like that are so tough to break through? Well, everyone who read Eleanor Olifant is completely fine, which is a huge book. This book made it so big. There are tons of books out there you may have read, for example, where you identify so closely with the character and you're like, I had no idea anyone was going through that. I had no idea other people felt that way. That's powerful. So like, just because you might be putting some stuff in your work that is not like super positive or something, or it exposes, a painful aspect of your life, something you went through, maybe you went through a really tough breakup, and let's say you want to include that in your book, you want to write about this breakup and what might have happened if you didn't break up. This guy didn't break up with you, or you didn't break up with him or her. Let's say you want to explore what if you were the ones who did the breakup. These are all things that you can write about that are cathartic, and that can lead into a great fiction story. So many people are going to automatically get you. They're going to be like, yes, I went through that too. I feel so much better. So you can also do that with the ambiance of your book. I infuse a lot of ambiance into my books. I infuse the feelings of my characters. I might infuse how I'm feeling or things that I like. You can do that by, let's say you're feeling really happy and you want to put in a very sunny scene. That's literally what you can do. You can put in a sunny scene and you can put your character in a meadow and you can do all kinds of great things. You can literally write anything you want. And I think one of the keys that people struggle with, excuse me, is the idea that you can literally write anything. All the things that you can't do in life, you can do in fiction. So that can be extremely cathartic and exciting. You can explore areas you could never do in real life. So now I'm going to share with you how you can stay motivated. And I'm going to show you my Pinterest board. I'm going to share that with you. Make this a little wider for you so you can see it better. I'm going to share with you the best way that you can do Pinterest to stay motivated and the worst way. So what I did at first was I started a Pinterest board for, this is actually my Brotherhood of Secrets Pinterest board. That's a book, as you know, was already published. This is all Victorian stuff. It's Victorian America. And one of the biggest things in that is that it's a locksmith shop. It revolves around a locksmith shop and the employees in it who are desperate for any kind of family because they have none of their own. They have tough backgrounds. So what I did with this board, which was not great, was I pinned only the stuff I was sure I was going to write. I thought that if I pinned a whole bunch of, people from the Victorian era, and I pinned a whole bunch of, clothes and locks and keys, and I looked at those for inspiration, that would be enough. And in some ways, it's great, of course, and you should definitely do that. But the thing was that every time I looked at this board, I was sort of like, it was like rubbing sandpaper against my brain. I was like, it's the same thing. It's not helping anymore. It's not working for me anymore. It's helping with stuff I know, but it's not helping with stuff I don't know. my suggestion to you is that you do the opposite. Well, not do the opposite. You can include all the stuff that you know for sure, but don't forget to include all the stuff that you're not sure about. So what you're seeing here is my Pinterest board for something that has not yet been released. It's the secret project that you guys now know about. And it is more of a dystopian novel. What did I do with this board? I started out pinning a whole lot of neon stuff and neon cities and all the stuff I was picturing. Once again, found as I was writing, I was like, you know, this is all stuff I know. I can look at it for inspiration, but it's actually not helping me move forward. So this is when I started pinning stuff that was farther off from that. I started seeing something, and instead of saying, is this exactly what I want to put in my book? Instead of saying that, I said, you know what? This is close. This inspires me. This gets me excited and makes me want to write. And it has something to do with the dystopian world. You know, it's all neon, and that's part of what's important here. So did I picture, you know, diamond shapes and triangle shapes and stuff when I was thinking of this book? No, no, I didn't. But when I saw it, I was thinking, you know, that's kind of interesting. Makes me think really far outside the box, kind of inspires me to do different kinds of things. I think I'm going to start pinning that. And that's what I started doing. This girl has nothing to do with anything, but she made me feel excited about writing this particular book. So, I mean, you know, this ladder has nothing to do with anything either. But when I look at it, I'm like, wow, the possibilities, that's so exciting. I really want to save that. So think a little bit outside the box, even when you're doing things like pinning. That will keep you motivated, and it will allow your mind, while you're just scrolling through your Pinterest, looking at these pictures, to think outside of your original ideas. So you are unboxing your creativity by saying, you know what? I don't know if I'm going to include this in my writing or not. I'm going to include it in my Pinterest board. And every time it's going through my mind, it's going past my eyes, I'm thinking outside of what I have already written. And that's the biggest key. So let me bring this back up. Okay, thank you guys so much for sticking around with me. I'm super excited that I got the chance to do this, and I hope that all of that helped you. These are just really the beginning of unblocking your creativity. I tried to get in there the most important stuff that I want everyone to know, some of the stuff that people always suffer with, and I really hope that some of this will get you thinking well outside of the box. It will get you thinking in totally different directions and make your creativity limitless. As you guys know, I'm an editor. I have my own editing business. So you will get 10% off of your any editing service you choose from me. If you are to contact me, let me know that you're from Girls Night In online. Make sure you put that somewhere in the email so I know that we know each other. A special offer just for you guys, this is not on my website anywhere, is that you guys can have a free 15-minute consultation. So I'm going to give you my information on the next page, but if you guys just want to like talk with me and see, am I going to be helpful to you? Is there anything I can offer you? We can talk about whether, we could work together or not. And so that's a free 15 minutes for you. We can talk about anything that you want to talk about. The final offer that is just for Girls Night In online is if you book 3 coaching sessions with me, which are typically $50 an hour, I will only charge you $120, which is a 20% discount. So that, again, I'm not offering that anywhere else. If you contact me in the next 7 days, so I'm giving you a full week to contact me, have your free 15-minute consultation. Let's see if we work well together. And then if you want to book 3 coaching sessions, you get a discount just because you came to this webinar. Again, thank you so much for being here. I'm really appreciative. I'm going to check the chat now for questions. If you enjoyed this presentation and you want to donate to my Venmo, you can look in the chat and see the information there. It's at C Stratos, which is just my first initial and my last name. And the confirmation code is 7327. You can see that in the chat. Do stay in touch with me. The things I have on the side on the left here, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, those are all places I am. Pinterest, of course. Come follow me there. Let's talk. You can write to me on my website, on any of my websites. So I'm going to stop sharing right now. I'm going to head into the chat just in case you guys have questions. And I'm going to see, okay, so, right, my notebook, yes, perfect. That's a great question. So let me show you. You guys, am I big on the screen? I don't think I am. I might not be. Let me see.
Yes, you are.
I am? Okay, thank you so much for letting me know. Okay, so here is the notebook that I used for Anatomy of a Darkened Heart. I'm going to show you an example of some pages. Here you can see that I have pasted, some text in. Here, this is something I found. It's just a really cool thing from the time period on how you can make rose ebony really cool. So as you can see, I've drawn some arrows. I have some highlighting. Let me straighten that out for you. Things like that. Let me flip to another page. Over here, I'm going to show you, I actually like having pictures in here. So I will literally just start pasting pictures right here. I like to be able to sort of carry around a physical Pinterest. Now those flowers were symbolic in my book. So that's why I have them there. And frankly, I just really like having them in my notebook so that I can carry them around. Sometimes Pinterest just is not enough for me. I call this my real life Pinterest. Let me show you some other examples. Here's another one. I thought this would be a great quote. So I took it out and I wrote it in big Sharpie so that I would sort of get outside the confines of just regular pages. Regular lines in my notebook. I was having trouble with that. I was just sort of like, man, I have to stick with all the lines in here. And, you know, I'm kind of not feeling that. I gotta do something to break this up. So that's what I did. And then this is gonna seem so silly, but I was like, you know, I really, again, feel that I'm getting too perfectionist. I put one line sideways in my notebook. This is all silly, you know, like, so this all helps me so much to break outside of what I would typically put in a notebook. Let me show you another one. You know, it's all over the place. This is the kind of stuff that I do when I feel myself getting too perfectionist with myself. This is the book that I was talking about earlier. You don't have to buy this or anything. I just wanted to show you what I was saying. And of course, you guys might already know, Eleanor Olifant is Completely Fine. This is a great book to read if you want to see a good way of feeling, of expressing deep POV, which is when you write from somebody's perspective so deeply that you don't hear the author's voice at all. You're just constantly in the character's voice. It also expresses a lot of things about loneliness and depression and things like that that people don't talk about as much, right? But this was a huge best-selling novel. So if you ever doubt whether your feelings are relevant to a novel, read that one. That will prove it to you. So I'm going to scroll back here just a little bit to see if we have some questions. Do you think people sometimes obsess over the correct way to write something versus their best story? Excuse me. Yes, you're right, JD, they do. I used to do that too. Some people will really stress about, for example, what is the structure? What should it be? Should it be a 3-act structure, a 4 or a 5? How should I be writing this? You know, all kinds of technicalities. Where does the climax go? Have I hit that yet? All this kind of stuff. The most important thing is that you write, because the thing is, you might come up with something extremely original. This is something that people concern themselves with in the first draft that hurts their creativity because they're so obsessed with making sure the structure is dead on. You can always fix the structure. You can always go back and say, you know what? I'm missing the climax in here. Where did it go? You know, there's just nothing there. You never know. The middle can slow down, but that doesn't matter in your first draft. That's editing. In your first draft, just get stuff down. Whatever it is that you want to write, make sure you're writing it. It doesn't matter what the structure is. It doesn't matter if it's correct at all. Again, you know, don't judge yourself. So somebody says, Pam says, I enjoy writing humorous insights and very short stories. Would blogging be an avenue to determine if others find my stories amusing and worth following? That's an interesting question. You know, I actually started writing microfiction on my blog. Excuse me, I wasn't Yeah, it was on my blog, actually. A long time ago, it was on my blog. And I did get feedback. And I found that people were interested and they had like their own spins on. So first of all, don't have a thin skin, because people will come back and they have specific things that they want to read. And you'll write something your way and they're going to come, they're going to come back and say, maybe you want to try fixing this. I would have preferred it if it was that way. And that's totally fine. What you need to develop is a sort of neutrality where you're listening. But, you know, your style is your style. And if you get like comments all the time, for example, that like, this is too short, let's say, you know, your short story is so short that I really didn't feel part of the character. If you get that kind of comment over and over again, you might want to listen. But you know, yes, you can absolutely find out by sharing, you know, putting it on a blog, and then maybe sharing it on Facebook and Twitter, you know, come let me know what you think. Yes, you can definitely see what people think, although not all opinions, like I said, should be listened to. It really depends on where you're going with it. Okay, I also see what is a good way to start a free blog. So I'm not sure if you mean like, oh good, JD answered that. I see that. He says Blogger, WordPress, and Wattpad are great options. And he's of course dead right. He knows what he's talking about. I'm gonna keep scrolling and see if I see any questions. Really grateful you guys are hanging on here. Okay, do you write as well in the notebook, or do you type in a computer? I do both. I actually have a very, very specific way that I have to do these things. I have to start in a notebook, and usually it's a dedicated notebook. For example, this one that I showed you here, this one had the lock on it. And for me, that really spoke to me about my Dark Victoriana collection series. So when a notebook speaks to me, that's the notebook I have to use. That's the one obsessive part of myself I can't get away from. That one's a little tricky. But I always start, this is just me again, you know, you can try it, but do what works best for you. I always start in a notebook. As you saw, I write down all kinds of ideas. I will write from a character's perspective. Then I'll write, you know, something in the middle. I'll write what I think the end is going to be. I'll stick in pictures. I'll write ideas about what the title might be. For some reason, paper is the best place for me to start. At some point, I start thinking, the paper is holding me back. I can't work on paper anymore, and I move to the computer. So that's when I use, personally, like you can use Word, you can use really anything you want, Pages. I really like Scrivener. I don't know if you've heard of that. That's Scrivener, and actually I'll just type it in here, Scrivener, so you guys can see. Oops, I just need to switch who I'm talking to. Here we go. So Scrivener, I personally like because I write way out of order. I write the middle, and then I write some of the beginning, and then I write the end, and then I change the end, and then I write some of the middle. I skip all over the place from different people's perspectives all the time. And in Scrivener, the way that it works is you have like documents within your project so that you can write a scene, and then you can start a new document in your project, and it's all sort of together. And it's kind of like weird to say. I wonder if I could show you, but it's really easy to write with because you can then take all of your scenes and rearrange them in any way you want. You can also have things in there that are like your research. So everything is sort of part of one project. And since you guys are asking and you're interested in like that kind of a process, let me quickly bring something up for you. I don't really share this kind of stuff with people, so this is really just for you. I'm going to share my screen in just 1 second so you can see what it is I'm talking about. Here I go. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. This is Scrivener. This is something I'm working on, a project I'm working on that I haven't shared with anybody. If you can see on the side, I know it might be a little bit small for you. You can have, for example, all of these are just scenes. It looks a little bit overwhelming, but they're scenes. This is how I organize it. Some people do like separate chapters and separate scenes and all kinds of stuff. But what I do is just scenes. I just separate the scenes. And that way, Because each scene is written separately, like this, you see it's just like a paragraph. It can be really long, it can be really short, it can be anything. I can just like pick up my first scene, and if I say, you know what, that belongs in the middle, I can drag it and bam, I just moved it to the middle. So there's no like copying and pasting in Word or anything. That used to get in my way quite a lot. So I'm going to move that back. Also in Scrivener, you have like a notes section, if you can see towards, down here. And, I keep like my character roster is here. I have special terms I've come up with. I put research in there. As you can see, like everything is in one place. It's super, super easy. And then when you're ready, if you want to publish, you can just export the stuff that's ready to be published. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you since I know you guys are interested in this stuff, which I'm thrilled about. We have another question here. Do you think a crossover is a good idea when you are writing a story? So if you're talking about a crossover, I'm not sure, Maria, if you mean like a crossover within, like of something that's already written, or if you mean a crossover of your own work. I write crossovers of my own work, actually, and it is a good idea. So if that's what you mean, yes, because the thing is that like, especially if you're writing either a series or a collection, which a collection is when you write, let's say, multiple novels and they're related, but you don't have to read them in order necessarily. That's what mine are. They're all standalone. And if you read them in order, all the better. But, if you don't, it really doesn't matter. They're all in the same universe. They're all in Victorian America, same general time period. My first book is about the Whitestone family and, a lot of family drama stuff. The second book is about a locksmith shop and what people will do to gain a family when they don't have one and they're damaged from different things that have happened in their past. There is absolute crossover between those two. Now, when you do crossover, Maria, the one thing you don't want to do is just copy and paste huge chapters or sections out of your original book. What you do want to do is you can include the same characters so that people are saying, oh, I remember that character from book one. I love that character, or something along those lines, or I remember that place. You can even have it in the same place and say like, oh man, I love that cafe that appeared in the first book. I actually work with a romance author who has a very long series, and every book has a mention of a character that will eventually have their own romance book. So in that way, people keep following because they want to see like, when is that person going to pop up and who's the next person that I've read about who's going to be, have their own book, and they get excited about it. And when they see the name of the person who has their next book, they get so excited and they're just like, oh, I remember him. I can't wait to see what happens. So like, there are so many ways that you can cross over, Maria. Awesome. Okay, let's see. Who else has a question? We have, is it better to self-publish or try to get a publisher? That is totally up to you. It depends on your goals. So the one thing to keep in mind about getting a publisher, oh, I see I missed a question too. I'll go back to you. I'm sorry. So the one thing to keep in mind about having a publisher is it really depends on what your goals are. If your goal is to simply have a publisher behind you who may or may not like sort of push your work, or just to remember that the marketing comes heavily down to you these days. So if your goal is like, I want to get published so that I don't have to handle any of the marketing stuff, that's not a reason to do the traditional publishing, because a lot of times they're going to ask you to do most of it. I've seen bigger authors who have to send out their own invitations in the mail for, like book events, and like that's their dollar sometimes. So, don't do it for the marketing. If you did want to do it because you don't want to deal with, the process aside from the writing, that's different. Then sure, go and check it out, see what you think. Go to these different literary agents, check out small presses. It can be complicated, so it's up to you if you check that out and it's like too much, But the self-publishing game is, of course, a little bit labor intensive, but you have total control. So, for me, I personally like to self-publish most of the time because I just want to have control of my cover. I want to have control of the ultimate story. There are some people who would love for a publisher to point them in the right direction and say, what you're doing is great, but let's change the ending and let's change a couple of things about it because it's not going to, sell huge unless you change it. If you're cool with that and you want that kind of guidance, great, go for traditional publishing. It could be really great. Small presses too. But if you're like me and you want like total control over your project, I'm willing to learn all the ins and outs that I have to learn to self-publish because it means that much to me. So, it really depends on your goals. That's what I can tell you. Now, the question I accidentally missed was, is there any writer community you recommend for a beginner? That's a great question. And I believe that JD mentioned somewhere in here, yeah, I see it there, National Novel Writing Month. Now, it's actually not just 1 month. It is November. You are writing for 30 days and you're trying to write a full-length novel in the span of 1 month. So that's a great way to connect with people. And the thing is that actually does continue through the year. Although it's called National Novel Writing Month or NaNoWriMo, as you'll see the hashtag, it does continue through the year. People are able to connect and keep those connections. I've met people that way, which is really cool. You develop writer friends, you develop, writing sprint friends and stuff like that. You could go to, I think it's nanowrimo.org to check that out. Just put in the hashtag NaNoWriMo. It's, I think, like I said, I think that JD already put it in, but I'm going to put it in again. You can just go to there. You can look that up and find loads of people. The other thing you can look up is the hashtag writing community, which is super, super popular. I mean, you're going to find so many people on there, and you can just start like commenting to them or asking questions and using that hashtag. And sometimes people will come back to you and answer. The best thing you can do is participate in other people's questions, because then they want to start to get to know you. This is how you build your network. So, that's what I would say. Also to that question, there are, of course, in person, but virtual right now, communities or groups that you can join, writing groups like Sisters in Crime, which I am a part of. I don't write mysteries necessarily, but that group is an amazing group of people who, it's so easy to network with them. It's so easy to talk to them, get to know them. They are a big mix of self-published and traditional. It's really fantastic. And it's just, they give you all these, what do you call it? They do all kinds of workshops too that can benefit you. So that's another thing. So we have the question, will the same rules apply for a screenplay? So when you say rules, if you'd like to speak, you can. But I'm not sure what you mean by rules, but if you're talking about just like writing your first draft as you see it, yeah, absolutely. I would say that, because the thing is, like, when you write your first draft, if you write it in the format of a short story or something, I'm doing this right now for a podcast, actually. It's great that you asked that. Hopefully I'm answering the question right. But I will write something in the form I'm comfortable with. I will write it in the form of a short story or something similar. And then I will turn it into a script. It's easier if you write in the format you're comfortable with, because you just take off. You can just start writing, and then your creativity can flow. Don't block yourself with formatting or anything like that. Just go. And then after the fact, you'll find that you probably have even too much information for a screenplay, actually, because screenplays, of course, are a little bit more sparse. And you can then format it. You can go back and figure out what belongs and what doesn't, but you may have more background than you need, which can never really hurt. It's in your back pocket, so somebody comes back to you, you submit your screenplay somewhere, they come back to you and say, what were you thinking about this? Well, actually, I already wrote that. So I have the answer for you right here, so I hope that I answered that question. And I see that the last question was, are there grammar checking websites for writers? And I see somebody answered that and said, yes, there is Grammarly that helps with all that. That's fine. I will tell you, I've actually, had to edit things that are straight out of Grammarly, and there are still loads of mistakes. I'm sorry to say, it's a machine. It can't know everything. So I would still hire, proofreader. If you're doing, like, for example, a novel, short story, I would still hire a proofreader. That's not just me saying, like, I want to be hired by you. Of course, I'd love to work with you. But, these things can only know so much, and there are going to be mistakes. So, Sure, use it, to clean stuff up if you want, but just make sure that you get it cleaned up further the rest of the way by a human. Okay, and we have the structure that you use. Okay, for writing books, I did answer your questions, Elisa. Thank you. I'm glad that I did. Um, okay, great. Well, it seems like I think I have answered all the questions. Thank you guys so much for asking them. Thank you so much for coming. I'm really excited that you were here. And just remember, keep in touch with me.